What is up, guys? 70 Savage here, coming at you today with another exciting video. Today we are going to be talking about one of the most important components in any camper van conversion, the diesel heater. If you are new to the channel, we have been converting this Sprinter van right here to be the ultimate zombie apocalypse survival vehicle. We have been making videos documenting every single step along the way. There's videos on the floor, there's videos on the electrical. Everything we've put in here, we've made a video about it and put it on this channel. So if you're interested in watching me build these crazy things, slap that subscribe button below. Diesel heaters are one of those components that after you install them and you try them out for the first time, you're just like, holy crap, this thing is amazing. They work so well. They barely sip any fuel at all. They're only about the size of a football. And in sub-zero conditions, you're gonna be able to keep your van nice and cozy. There's really no other practical way to heat your van when it's cold outside. So in this video, we're gonna be talking about how these diesel heaters work, the best diesel heaters you can possibly buy, some guidelines for how to install them properly, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about hydronic heaters, which are kind of a similar topic. Let's get cracking. So first off, how do these things even work? Well, they're actually really simple. They're basically just little tiny diesel engines that generate heat. If your van runs off of gasoline instead of diesel fuel, they do make these things that run on gas. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. These heaters barely sip any fuel. And when I say barely any fuel, I mean they typically take about a gallon if you leave them running for 24 hours straight. Now, if your van is well insulated, even in freezing temperatures, it's only going to be running about half the time, which means if you use this thing overnight, you're not even going to notice a difference in the fuel gauge. Let's do a quick demo so that I can show you guys how my heater works now that I've installed it. All we need to do is open our fancy cabinet latch here into our control panel. And then we have our little thermostat here. It says it's 73 degrees in here, which is a little bit hot for heating, but let's do it anyway. So if I hold that button down, you can see the outer circle turned red, and we have it set to 79 degrees, running infinitely until I decide to turn it off. And now we'll listen to this thing start up. So if we come outside of the vehicle and take a look underneath the van here, we can see that the little fuel pump is actually pumping fuel into the diesel heater. I can hear some air being sucked in through this combustion air intake, and I can also slightly smell the air that's going outside of the exhaust to the other side of the van over there. So even out here, this thing is ridiculously quiet. It's about the same volume as a roof fan on medium setting. Kind of cool, this pump mixes the fuel and some air. You can see it making its way up into the heater there. And then the heater itself, which is located in the base of this cabinet right here, that's actually generating the heat right now and pumping it out of two different places. I have one heater vent on this side of the tall cabinet, as well as one heater vent on this side of the tall cabinet, so that when I eventually get my bed in here, I'm gonna have a nice warm sleeping area. And at the same time, I will also have a nice warm living area. And if I want to prioritize the bed, or I want to prioritize the heat in the living area, I can simply just shut one of the vents. And that's literally all there is to it. Heats your van up when it's cold outside. What a concept. If it's not cold outside, like it is right now, it'll just turn your van into a sauna. So I'm gonna be getting to sweat profusely while I'm filming the rest of this video. Actually, it might be better to just continue from out here. As far as the best, there's really two different ways that you can go. There is the cheap ones and there are the expensive ones. If you're willing to spend about $1,300 all in, then you could go the expensive route and you can get the best of the best. But if you're not willing to spend that kind of money, then you want to go the cheap route, which are about $200 all in. If you go the cheap route, you're not gonna have as good of reliability, but they still perform pretty well. It's important to note that if you need a gasoline powered heater and not a diesel powered heater, you can only go the expensive route. So I've put in a ton of research and combined that with my experience installing a couple of these heaters and using them on the road. And I have three different recommendations for you guys. The first recommendation is my favorite expensive diesel heater. In my opinion, this is the best diesel heater you can buy, and that is the Espar S2 diesel heater. It's very similar to the Webasto ones. I just slightly prefer the Espar because of the user interface on the control. The second recommendation is for the best cheap heater. Now, this is not the cheapest heater you can possibly find, but in my opinion, the best overall for a cheap heater. It's about $139 right now on Amazon. I'll put a link to it in the description below. There's actually links to all of these heaters in the description below. And then my third recommendation is the best gasoline powered heater. As I mentioned before, this is also an expensive one, but it has really good reviews and I've heard lots of good things about it. And by the way, the links that I've put to these heaters contain everything that you need to get this heater working. The only reason you need to buy more parts is if you're going to do some sort of custom type of installation. And that covers it for what I think are the best heaters on the market right now. Now, this is not going to be an in-depth guide by any means on how to install these heaters. I made a 45-minute video last year about how to install the Espar S2. It's a very similar process for any of these heaters that you choose. That video is popping up on the screen right now. So in general, it's really intimidating when you first get this kit in the mail and you need to figure out how to install it. But it actually becomes really simple if you just think about all of the different inputs to the heater and the outputs from the heater. Let's start with the inputs. The heater needs 3 different things in order to work. First off, it needs fuel. That's what it burns to create heat. The way that you get fuel into the heater is with a fuel line that's connected to an auxiliary fuel port on your fuel tank. And then in order to route that fuel from the tank into your diesel heater, you need a fuel pump that's just connected towards the end of the fuel line. Second input that you're going to need is the combustion air that gets combined with the burning fuel in order to generate that heat. The way you get this combustion air into your heater is super simple. You literally just install an empty pipe that attaches to the heater on one side. Only consideration here is that that hose can't be located anywhere near the output of the exhaust. You don't want the exhaust fumes to get sucked into the combustion air intake. The third input to these heaters is the electrical. Now, a few different aspects of the heater need electrical inputs. The first one is the thermostat. The second one is the heater itself, so that it can be electrically started and you don't need to pull start it. And then the third electrical input goes to the fuel pump so that I can get that fuel into the heater. And that covers it for inputs. Now let's talk about the outputs, which are even simpler. The first output, the one that we all actually care about, is the hot air that gets pumped into the cabin. The second output is the exhaust, and you're gonna need to route that exhaust out to the side or out through the back of the van. The important thing to note about this exhaust pipe is that it does get very, very hot. I've read that it gets up to about 400 degrees. I actually used 1-inch standoffs on every mounting location for my exhaust pipe just to reduce the odds that it's going to melt anything. And that is literally it. When you have those 3 inputs and you have those 2 outputs connected, you are good to go and your heater is 100% functional. Let's move into the guidelines for how to install these heaters so that you can have the best experience while you're actually using them. The basic version of a diesel heater install is typically underneath the passenger seat in your van. A lot of people will install their heaters there because there's typically nothing underneath that passenger seat. It's a perfect place to put that heater. The downside of this location is that all of your heat is coming from the front corner of your van. So if you have a larger van or a more sectioned off build layout, then you might not be able to get that heat all the way to the back, let's say to your bed area. For most vans though, this isn't going to be a huge problem. I did this in my last van and it was still fine. In larger or more sectioned off builds, you're gonna wanna put your heater in a more central location. In ours, you guys saw that we have it located in that tall cabinet, which is pretty much the center of the living area. And then we have 2 heat outputs, one pointing to the front of the van and then one to the back of the van, so that we get heat propagated throughout the entire thing evenly. So when you're mounting this heater underneath the passenger seat, you probably won't need a mounting plate because you can drill directly through the sheet metal and you will be good to go. But if you are installing it in the living section of your van, you need to think about drilling through the floor and the sheet metal of the van. So what you want is a mounting plate that looks like this. This is going to allow you to drill one big hole through the sheet metal and through your van's floor, and then you'll have a nice sectioned off area for all of the diesel inputs and outputs. I will put a link to this mounting plate in the video description below. So there are a couple of things that you can do while you're installing this diesel heater to make the experience better afterwards when you're actually using it. First thing, it's really nice to have the exhaust pointed somewhere that you are not. So you want to think about how you use your van. Where are you entering and exiting? Which windows of the van do you have open when you're sleeping? And make sure that the exhaust is pointed away from all of that, I think for most people, a good location to have the output of the heater's exhaust is the opposite side of the cargo door. The next important thing to consider when you're installing this heater is the location of the thermostat. Now with these diesel heaters, the thermostat is also the temperature sensor, so that's going to be what's telling your heater to turn off or on if it's too hot or too cold. What that means is the thermostat should be placed somewhere where it's going to get a good indication of the average temperature of the van. If you lock that thermostat away in a cabinet somewhere, then it's not going to read the temperature very accurately, and it might get super hot inside of your van. Last topic that I want to cover is something very similar to these diesel air heaters, and it is the hydronic version of the diesel heater. Now, hydronic heaters are very similar to diesel air heaters in the sense that they take gasoline and they create heat. They are so similar that the same companies that make the diesel air heaters, like Webasto and Espar, actually manufacture these hydronic heaters as well. The main difference with the diesel hydronic heaters as opposed to the diesel air heaters is that instead of just heating your air, the hydronic heaters can also do things like heat your water tank, they can create heated floors, and they will also heat the air in your van as well. So the way that these hydronic heaters work is instead of directly heating up hot air and blowing that hot air into your van, they are heating up a coolant loop. A coolant loop is literally just a set of pipes that has liquid running through it, in and out of the heater, and is constantly getting heated up by the heater. Now you have to make this coolant loop and run the coolant loop wherever you need it, but if you want to use the hydronic heater to heat up your water tank, you would use what's called a water heat exchanger that would take that hot coolant and it would exchange the heat between that coolant loop and the water that you want to heat. The concept is exactly the same for anything else that you want to use a hydronic heater for. You'll basically attach a heat exchanger to that coolant loop, whether it be an air heat exchanger, a water heat exchanger, or just go to the coolant that's in your engine. You're basically just putting a heat exchanger on the coolant loop anywhere that you want that heat to be used. So hydronic heaters are obviously a much more versatile way to heat things than the simple air heaters, but there are a couple of trade-offs for using them. The main trade-off for hydronic heaters, one that I'm probably gonna get some heat for, pun intended, is that these heaters are not designed to run for long periods of time. Now, to be fair, I've never heard a single complaint from van lifers who use hydronic heaters, but I did read a comment directly from Espar about their hydronic heaters, stating that they were not designed for this purpose, and that's what pretty much scared me off from using a hydronic heater in this van build. So I think that hydronic heaters are a very interesting option, but they're just not for me. I use the diesel heater to heat the air in the van, and then I have a completely separate electric water heater when I want a hot shower. So this covers everything that I could possibly share about diesel heaters, and I hope that you guys learned something from it. If you did learn something, or you think this might help teach other people, slap that like button below. It will help the YouTube algorithm push this video out to more people. And if you are not yet a subscriber, we have been cranking out these YouTube videos for years, and I have no plan of stopping anytime soon. Shout out to the true fans who have made it this far in the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.